8-bit Nintendo Famicom. The Famicom is Nintendo's greatest achievement, and it had games developed for it from 1983 until 1994. If you're only playing and collecting Western NES games, then you're missing out on the wild, weird world that is Famicom cartridges. They tend to be a lot smaller, a lot more colorful, and a heck of a lot more affordable. And there are literally over 1,000 games that we never got in the US. Just look at the colorful, fun, weird, plastic glory that is the Nintendo Famicom. Familiar, yet foreign at the same time.
There were officially 1,063 Famicom games released on cartridge, and 199 on the Famicom Disk System. In this video, I'm going to go over 7 games for the Nintendo Famicom that are better in Japan. And quite a lot cheaper is also quite a lot better.
Jackie Chan's Action Kung Fu. US price, $87. Japan price, $12. Jackie Chan was incredibly productive during the 1980s and starred in Kung Fu movie after Kung Fu movie. All of his characters are supposed to be different, but he pretty much had the exact same prototypical Jackie Chan persona in almost all of his movies as a likable, somewhat dopey hero who's phenomenally good at stunts and Kung Fu. In 1990, Hudson published a Famicom game not based on any one particular Jackie Chan movie, but rather an amalgamation of his historical Chinese action characters, but with some fantasy elements. The game was developed by Now Production, who also made Splatterhouse Wampaku Graffiti, as well as many of the Adventure Island Famicom sequel games. You play as Jackie Chan in historical China, and a generic bad guy set out to capture his fictional sister, and then go on to oppress the entire nation of ancient China. So, the Jackie Chan composite character is out to right the wrongs in a really fun side-scrolling action game with 5 stages involving kicking, jumping, punching, and using power-up items in the forms of special moves that you get by hitting the power-up frog and collecting rice bowls for health. They also developed an excellent TurboGrafx-16 and PC Engine version of this game, but the Famicom version is quite good. The NES version was brought to the US before Jackie Chan himself was popular over here. The Famicom version has more of an anime version of Jackie Chan on the title screen, while the US version has a pretty good caricature of Jackie Chan on the title screen, but the box art and cartridge artwork makes him look a lot more like Bruce Lee. The NES cartridge has been going up in price and is currently around $87. However, the Famicom version is easy to find, and you can get a copy of it for roughly $12. I've actually always greatly enjoyed this game, and it always puts a smile on my face. It is a lot of fun. FC Genjin, aka Bonk's Adventure. US price, $1,000. Japan price, $17. PC Genjin, known as Bonk's Adventure in the West, was released in late 1989 on the PC Engine in Japan. However, Hudson Soft published a Famicom port made by Japanese developer AI in 1993. FC Genjin, Freakathroporis Computerus. Even though it was based on the more powerful PC Engine hardware, this platformer, starring the beloved platform mascot Bonk, put together a very technically impressive version where they almost recreated the original game on Famicom. The US version of this game is insanely rare, and it goes for $1,000 for a loose cart, due to the combination of it being a game starring a very well-known character and an incredibly very low print run, and it actually being a very fun game. Meanwhile, the Japanese Famicom version is pretty easy to come by, and I got my copy for $17. It's a surprisingly fun game, both for fans of the Bonk series, and for people who have never played the Bonk series, but they love 8-bit Nintendo Famicom. Power Blazer, aka Power Blade. US price, $67. Japan price, $19. So when I started writing this video, I was going to point out how Taito made a side-scrolling action platformer game like Mega Man in Japan and called it Power Blazer. But when they localized, they turned a cute SD kawaii anime hero, a little cyborg guy who runs around and throws boomerangs, into a bland Arnold Schwarzenegger lookalike. Then I found out that they completely changed the level layout, the difficulties, and actually made it easier for once and almost completely changed the game. You get the feeling that Power Blade started off as a localized version of Power Blazer, but then went off and basically became a completely new game. So it ends up the American version is actually a lot easier, and they developed a sequel that only came out in the US. The problem is that the Japanese version is quite difficult, and the controls are a lot tougher compared to the eventual American game, but the two are just different enough to like them both. So if you're into 8-bit anime platformer games, it's definitely worth checking out Power Blazer, especially if you like Power Blade and you want more. Donkey Kong Jr. Math. US price $202. Japan price $7. Right after the Famicom came out, Nintendo quickly retooled two existing games, Popeye and Donkey Kong, as educational titles so they could try to convince parents that there was some educational merit to buying a Nintendo family computer. As a result of it, Donkey Kong Jr. Math doesn't really feel like a real game. It's more like a tech demo. So the game features Donkey Kong Jr. scrambling to collect numbers and mathematical operators that are needed to equal a given random number that Donkey Kong will display. It's a competitive two-player game. However, they didn't bother coding an AI player, so every single game is a two-player competitive mode, but the second player is Donkey Kong Jr. but pink, who will just sit there dumbfounded. As a result of that, there is no incentive to try to complete the equation in time. Because it's not a real game, there's no consequence in failure. There's no stakes. I've never actually played Donkey Kong Jr. Math against another human, and it might be fun, but I don't know, because I've never tried it. There are two difficulty levels, and then a long calculation mode, which I was not able to figure out how to operate. You get the feeling that Nintendo made this game so they could have an educational section on the NES games poster and show parents that they had some rough plans for some educational games, but they never delivered. Donkey Kong Jr. Math shipped in the US in ridiculously small numbers, and an American copy of the game is over $200, just for the cart. I procured a Japanese copy for $7, but that brings me to the special bonus game that I'm going to include in this video. Bonus game! Popeye no Eigo Asobi. Popeye's Fun with English. Japan price, $5. Popeye's Fun with English is an obvious retooling of the NES Famicom version of Popeye. In this game, Olive Oil will display a Japanese word written in katakana, and Popeye will have to run around and punch various English letters to spell out the translated English word. Bluto is there to capture Sweet Pea the baby if you can't produce the Japanese word translated into English. You do this by selecting letters Wheel of Fortune style that display if you get a correct letter. It's a surprisingly fun game if you know some Japanese and can read katakana. It is meant for Japanese kids to learn English, but it works quite well for Western nerds learning Japanese. Nintendo actually included a fold-up poster with all of the translated vocabulary words, which I do not have. However, I did study Japanese for 3 years in high school, and in doing so, I barely know enough of the vocabulary words to play this game. Especially since this seems to focus on spelling English words that are presented with a Japanese noun. This is also an interesting piece of Nintendo history back from when the company used to experiment in licensing characters. This game was never reissued or released on any other platforms, as was the home version of Popeye. Nintendo really hates cutting licensing royalty checks, and that might be one of the reasons why Doki Doki Panic never saw re-release. Popeye's Fun with English was never translated, given its strict reliance on translating Japanese into English. But if you're a Famicom weeb, it's a must-own. Sqoon. US price, $144. Japan price, $5. Sqoon is a weird game. It is an arcade-style, side-scrolling shooter featuring a submarine out to liberate captured humans from alien captivity in a flooded world. It is cute and cartoony, and there's prototype DNA from the shoot-'em-up genre here. Your submarine craft is also rapidly losing fuel, and it actually took me a while to figure out that you had to release humans from captivity, get a total of 9, and then deliver them to a rescue ship on the surface, and then you will be granted a meager blessing of fuel to stave off your inevitable water-filled doom. As a resident of the Pacific Northwest, I greatly appreciated the orcas in the first stage, and I'm glad that they took a break from hunting billionaire yachts to star in this game. There are even topless mermaids on the title screen. Nothing like low-resolution 8-bit boobs. But I checked, and it's actually in the American version as well. This looks like an early Famicom game, and it plays like an early Famicom game. But Irene was able to actually put together a fun, colorful, brutally difficult shooter using regular NROM cartridges before the development of the various memory mapper chips. There really are not a lot of regional changes to Sqoon. There really were not a lot of Western NES versions of this game produced, and as a result of which, an American copy will set you back around $140. However, you can get the Japanese version for about $5. Also, Irene took advantage of the fact that Famicom third-party publishers were allowed to manufacture their own cartridges in Japan, so they included a red LED light in the cartridge that will light up when you're playing this game. Rumor has it that the fact that the original Famicom never had an LED light to show that it was powered on irritated one of the company executives at Irene, so in true 1980s Japanese mad scientist fashion, they put LED lights in the cartridge, and this was one of the few games that actually did light up. Does it impact the game? No, not in the least. But is it fun? Absolutely. It puts a smile on my face whenever I play Sqoon and my other Irene LED Famicom games. Oh yeah, it's really cool, and if you're collecting Famicom, you absolutely need to get a copy of Sqoon that lights up. Salamander, aka Life Force. US price, $16. Japan price, $16 as well. Konami produced some amazing freaking games on the Famicom. Gradius was one of the earliest third-party hits, and they followed it up with Salamander, which was brought to the US as Life Force. However, there were some significant differences between Life Force and Salamander. The biggest difference is that the original Famicom version allowed you to have 3 option pods that follow your spaceship, which greatly increased your firepower. In an effort to reduce slowdown, they capped the number of option pods that you could have in the US version at 2 pods. Salamander features the full firepower option of 3 option pods. There are animated stars on the title screen in Salamander, and there are 3 different endings that you can get to by beating the game without using continues, or by using a small amount of continues. And the power-up icon bar UI at the bottom more closely resembles Gradius. But I haven't even got to the freaking sweet transparent blue cartridge shell that Konami rolled out for Salamander. It looks like an aftermarket modification, but it's a legit transparent shell where you can see the circuit board and everything. It is cyberpunk, it is high-tech, and it's much better than the US version of Life Force. If you're going to collect Famicom, you need to get yourself a copy of Konami's Salamander. Rockman 5, aka Mega Man 5. US price $140. Japan price $5. The Rockman Mega Man game series was still going strong in December of 1992 when Mega Man 5 was released in America and Rockman 5 was released in Japan. The game was a lot easier to pick up and progress through than previous entries in the Mega Man game series. And it also features the character sprites being drawn slightly different using black on the sprites, and it really gives it more of a Konami feel despite it being made by Capcom. There really aren't a lot of regional differences between the title screen being slightly different and the beat letters spelling Rockman instead of Mega Man. And as I know I've said this before, America was a lot quicker to abandon 8-bit hardware, and as a result of it, a copy of Mega Man 5 will set you back roughly $140. Meanwhile, Rockman is available easily for roughly $5. Last year, I purchased a set of all 6 of the Rockman Famicom games, and it was an excellent move.
Masayuki Uemura was an engineer at Nintendo from 1971 to 2004, and he was the lead architect on the Famicom and Super Famicom consoles. His wife coined the phrase Famicom, and he was directly responsible for the major development of the Famicom that would make Nintendo the home gaming powerhouse that we've been enjoying for decades. I'm hard at work on part 2 of this video, and don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon to be notified of a new video. This is 8-Bit Joystick. Stay awesome. Play retro.